leadership, you're not being fair with us. This is our opportunity to provide an impetus to freedom and democracy in Latin America and create new jobs for America as well. It's a good deal, and we ought to take it. Thank you.
With those words and the stroke of a pen, President Bill Clinton signed the North American Free Trade Agreement, known as NAFTA, into law nearly 25 years ago. The treaty created a $6 billion marketplace that served the 360 million people living in the United States, Canada, and Mexico at the time. Proponents hailed NAFTA as a boost for the U.S. economy, but critics warned of domestic job losses, among them Florida's winter vegetable growers.
Since that year, we have deteriorated down to probably about a third to 40% of the size that we used to be because of the trade agreement, the free trade agreement, NAFTA.
Market to Market spoke with Paul DeMare, one of the Sunshine State's top tomato producers, in 1998, a few years after the trade pact was ratified. Before Congress, DeMare forecast the deal would cede market share to Mexico, citing meager wages, poor environmental regulations, and lax enforcement of child labor laws.
He testified back in the early 90s about what NAFTA would do to the state of Florida if it was passed. They didn't listen to him. It's way worse than what he ever described.
Kern Carpenter is a third-generation tomato grower in Homestead, Florida. He's watched the acres planted across Miami-Dade County dwindle from tens of thousands in the early 1980s down to around 1,000 today, leaving just a handful of producers. Situated atop the abundant Biscayne aquifer, South Florida is a traditional supplier of winter fruits and vegetables. Area growers agree they are incapable of satisfying all domestic demand, but Carpenter says NAFTA destroyed his upper hand by flooding the market with cheap produce. And he says the result is easy to spot in grocery store aisles.
Last year was the worst year of all the years that I farmed. The price averaged like $6 a box throughout the whole year. It takes about $10 average to break even, so it was a total disaster.
Carpenter hung on, though, driven by the outcome of 2016's presidential election.
NAFTA has been a horrible deal for the United States. It's been very good for Canada, it's been very good for Mexico, but it's been horrible for the United States.
I was thrilled to death when Trump became president because he's the only one that really was smart enough to see that we have a huge problem and something needs to be done. And he seems to be at least trying to attempt to do something about it.
For countless Americans, this agreement has failed.
But NAFTA renegotiations have been complicated. Midwestern row crop farmers largely support the deal, as is, for quadrupling farm trade and boosting exports of grain and oil seeds.
I feel like we're forgotten. No offense to the growers out west. I have friends that are out there, but a lot of that's subsidized by the government. They farm 30, 40,000 acres. That's a huge farm. And they do it with 6 guys. On our farm, we have between 60 and 80 people at any given day working every day, harvesting crops.
Tommy Vick also grows tomatoes in Homestead, but he's diversified his 900 acres of perishables to target niche markets and hedge against cheaper imports.
You don't know what the market's going to do, but if I've got 28 different crops, if I don't make it on one of them, at least half of them are going to make something.
Vick may be ahead of the curve, but he believes Mexico can still cut into his bread and butter.
Bottom line, to pay somebody $2 a day to work, you know, even though it's a third world country, you know, that's not fair. What would be an ideal situation? It's hard to say.
Quotas and tariffs have been floated, but as both sides continue to search for remedies, Vick and others say NAFTA also has unintentionally increased smuggling opportunities.
If they send a load of tomatoes, but you've got $2 million worth of drugs in there, who cares if they use the tomatoes or don't use the tomatoes? So that in turn gets dumped on the market and affects us also. Peppers and...
But illegal trade practices like currency manipulation and predatory pricing remain a top concern for some U.S. farm groups and local government.
What they're looking at now is the ability to seasonally bring the anti-dumping suits, which Mexico has said is a non-starter, which right there tells you that they're dumping seasonally.
Miami-Dade County Agricultural Manager Charles LaPrade says farm sales in his area average $700 million annually. But under the current system, half the growers of any commodity have to sign on to anti-dumping litigation, which he says costs nearly $1 million per case.
Our window is such that they know they can hammer us between January and March, and we can't get the 50% to bring a suit after that.
LaPrade would like to see national agricultural interests coordinate trade deals that create a level playing field for all domestic producers.
We need to help each other. I can't say it any more than that. But don't put a guy out of business here just because you want, 10 cents more a pound on corn.
LaPrade and Carpenter are both apprehensive about food security and diminishing acres.
I've seen limes that used to be here be $100 a box. After this hurricane we just had back in the fall, avocados were devastated here. Mexican avocados were $100 a box. So I promise you, when the vegetable growers are gone in Florida, there will be no cheap produce coming out of Mexico.
With farmers on the edge of their seat ahead of another round of trilateral talks, some Floridians may be prepping for a final harvest. And while President Trump gets credit for calling attention to NAFTA's inconsistencies, it's unknown what sort of yield will sprout from the current political environment. For Market to Market, I'm Josh Buettner.